In March 1979, the Houston Fire Department found itself at the center of one of the most audacious financial schemes ever perpetrated against a municipal government. What began as routine administrative oversight would evolve into a systematic theft that stripped over $3 million from the city's coffers. The perpetrators operated with precision, exploiting bureaucratic gaps and trust within the department's procurement system. For 36 years, this case remained partially resolved, with recovered funds falling short of the total stolen amount. Investigators had long suspected additional money remained hidden, but leads had grown cold, and key figures had either died or disappeared. Then, in 2015, a discovery in an abandoned storage facility would reignite the investigation and provide answers that had eluded authorities for decades. But before we examine that breakthrough, we need to understand how $3.3 million simply vanished from one of America's largest fire departments, and why it took over 3 decades to uncover the full scope of the conspiracy. Don't forget to subscribe. The Houston Fire Department in 1979 employed over 4,000 personnel across more than 100 stations throughout the metropolitan area. As the 4th largest city in the United States, Houston required extensive emergency services, and the fire department's annual budget exceeded $40 million. Equipment purchases, vehicle maintenance, and facility upgrades represented significant expenditures that required careful oversight and approval through multiple administrative levels. Within this complex bureaucracy worked 52-year-old Gerald Tompkins, a procurement specialist who had served the department for 18 years. Tompkins was responsible for coordinating equipment purchases, managing vendor relationships, and ensuring compliance with city bidding requirements. Colleagues described him as methodical and reliable, someone who understood the intricate procedures governing municipal spending. His position granted him access to purchase orders, vendor contracts, and payment authorizations. More importantly, Tompkins had developed relationships with suppliers throughout the region, many of whom had worked with the department for years. This network of contacts, built through legitimate business dealings, would become the foundation for an elaborate fraud scheme. The scheme began modestly in early 1978 with inflated invoices for routine supplies. Tompkins would approve purchases for equipment that was either never delivered or delivered in quantities smaller than billed. The excess payments, typically a few $100s per transaction, were split between Tompkins and complicit vendors. These initial fraudulent transactions tested the system's vulnerabilities and confirmed that oversight mechanisms were insufficient to detect the manipulation. Emboldened by early success, Tompkins expanded the operation significantly. He began creating entirely fictitious purchase orders for expensive equipment that was never intended for delivery. Fire trucks, specialized rescue equipment, and emergency communication systems appeared on departmental records as purchased and received, but existed only on paper. The corresponding payments, often exceeding $50,000 per transaction, were diverted to accounts controlled by Tompkins and his growing network of conspirators. Central to the expanded scheme was 48-year-old Marcus Delacroix, owner of Gulf Coast Emergency Equipment, a legitimate supplier that had worked with various Texas fire departments since 1971. Delacroix's company maintained proper business licenses, employed 12 people, and had an established track record of reliable service. This reputation provided perfect cover for fraudulent transactions that appeared routine within the department's procurement records. Under the arrangement with Tompkins, Gulf Coast Emergency Equipment would submit invoices for equipment that was never manufactured or delivered. These invoices contained authentic-looking specifications, serial numbers, and delivery schedules that passed initial administrative review. Delacroix would receive payment from the city, retain approximately 30% as his share, and transfer the remainder to accounts designated by Tompkins. The conspiracy required additional participants to maintain its complexity and avoid detection. Beverly Chen, a 34-year-old accountant in the fire department's finance division, provided crucial assistance by manipulating inventory records and payment documentation. Chen had worked for the city for 7 years and possessed detailed knowledge of the department's accounting procedures. Her involvement ensured that fraudulent purchases appeared properly documented and that discrepancies between ordered and received equipment were minimized in official records. Chen's role involved creating false receiving reports that confirmed delivery of equipment that never arrived. She would generate documentation showing that items had been inspected, accepted, and distributed to appropriate fire stations. These reports, bearing authentic department signatures and reference numbers, provided the paper trail necessary to justify payments to vendors. Without Chen's participation, the scale of fraud would have been impossible to sustain. The fourth key participant was 41-year-old Robert Hensley, a fire captain assigned to Station 23 in southwest Houston. Hensley's rank and reputation within the department provided credibility when questions arose about specific equipment purchases. As a 20-year veteran with commendations for service, his word carried weight with administrators who might otherwise scrutinize unusual transactions. Hensley's contribution involved confirming receipt of equipment at fire stations under his supervision. When audit procedures required verification that purchased items had been delivered and were operational, Hensley would provide false confirmations. He claimed that specialized equipment was in use, properly maintained, and performing as specified. These confirmations satisfied administrative requirements and prevented deeper investigation into the procurement process. The conspiracy's success depended on exploiting weaknesses in the department's oversight structure. Municipal procurement rules required multiple approvals for large purchases, but these approvals were largely administrative rather than substantive. Department heads relied on specialists like Tompkins to verify that purchases were necessary and properly specified. Once initial approval was granted, subsequent steps in the process received minimal scrutiny. Physical inventory procedures presented the greatest risk of detection, but the conspirators developed strategies to minimize this threat. Equipment was often described as being in use at remote locations, undergoing maintenance, or temporarily deployed to other agencies. When direct verification was required, Chen would produce documentation showing that items had been transferred, loaned, or were scheduled for replacement. These explanations, supported by official-looking paperwork, satisfied most inquiries without revealing the fraud. The stolen funds were channeled through multiple bank accounts to obscure their ultimate destination. Delacroix maintained business accounts in 3 different banks, allowing him to receive city payments through normal commercial channels. From these accounts, money was transferred to personal accounts belonging to the conspirators, or converted to cashier's checks made payable to shell companies they controlled. Tompkins established 2 consulting companies with addresses at commercial mail services, creating the appearance of legitimate business entities. These companies maintained bank accounts that received portions of the stolen funds, which were then distributed to participants or invested in assets that could be liquidated later. The complexity of these financial arrangements made it difficult for investigators to trace the complete flow of stolen money. By late 1978, the conspiracy was generating over $200,000 in fraudulent payments every month. The scale of theft had grown beyond simple procurement fraud to encompass a systematic looting of department resources. Equipment purchases that should have enhanced Houston's fire protection capabilities instead enriched the conspirators while leaving the department with fictional assets that existed only in administrative records. The success of the scheme created increasing risks as the amounts involved grew larger and more frequent. Vendors outside the conspiracy began questioning why Gulf Coast emergency equipment was receiving such a disproportionate share of department contracts. Other employees noticed discrepancies between equipment listed in inventory records and what was actually present at fire stations. These observations, while not immediately investigated, created a growing body of evidence that would eventually expose the fraud. In early 1979, the conspiracy faced its first serious threat when a routine audit identified significant discrepancies in equipment inventory. The audit, conducted by an external accounting firm contracted by the city, was intended to verify that purchased equipment was properly accounted for and maintained. What auditors discovered instead was a systematic pattern of missing equipment valued at over $1 million. The audit findings triggered immediate concern among city administrators who had assumed the department's procurement processes were functioning properly. Equipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars appeared in purchase records, but could not be located at any fire station. Serial numbers listed in inventory databases corresponded to items that had never been manufactured by their supposed suppliers. Delivery addresses referenced facilities that did not exist or had never received the specified equipment. As external auditors expanded their investigation, they uncovered invoices for items that defied basic logic. Purchase orders showed the department had bought 12 identical fire trucks within a 2-month period, yet only 3 new vehicles were present at stations citywide. Specialized rescue equipment worth over $400,000 was listed as delivered to stations that lacked the personnel trained to operate such machinery. Communication systems supposedly installed throughout the department were nowhere to be found. The auditors presented their preliminary findings to Fire Chief William Morrison in March 1979, documenting discrepancies that exceeded $2 million. Morrison, who had led the department for 6 years, was stunned by the scope of apparent theft. He immediately contacted the Houston Police Department and the FBI, requesting criminal investigation into what appeared to be massive fraud within his organization. Federal investigators assigned to the case began by examining financial records and interviewing department personnel. Special Agent Patricia Valdez, who specialized in white-collar crime, led the investigation with assistance from local detectives experienced in municipal corruption cases. Their initial focus centered on identifying how such extensive fraud had operated undetected for over a year. The investigation revealed that Tompkins had been careful to distribute fraudulent purchases across multiple budget categories and time periods, preventing any single transaction from triggering automatic review procedures. Large equipment purchases were broken into smaller components that fell below administrative thresholds, requiring additional oversight. What appeared to be routine procurement activity was actually carefully orchestrated theft designed to exploit bureaucratic blind spots. Chen's manipulation of inventory records had been particularly sophisticated, involving alterations to multiple database systems and the creation of cross-referenced documentation that supported false entries. She had generated maintenance schedules for equipment that did not exist, warranty information for fictional purchases, and transfer records showing movement of items between stations. This comprehensive falsification created the illusion of proper asset management while concealing the absence of actual equipment. As investigators traced financial transactions, they discovered the network of bank accounts and shell companies used to launder stolen funds. Delacroix's business records showed payments from the city that far exceeded his company's actual capacity to manufacture or supply equipment. Bank deposits corresponded directly to fraudulent purchase orders, establishing clear connections between false procurement documents and diverted city funds. The arrest of the 4 conspirators occurred simultaneously on April 15, 1979, preventing them from coordinating their defense strategies or destroying additional evidence. Federal agents executing search warrants at their homes and businesses recovered extensive documentation detailing the fraud scheme, including handwritten notes outlining profit distributions and plans for future fraudulent transactions. Tompkins maintained detailed records of every fraudulent transaction, apparently believing such documentation would protect him if disputes arose among the conspirators. These records, discovered in a safe at his residence, provided prosecutors with a complete roadmap of the conspiracy's operations. The documents showed how stolen funds had been divided, which purchases were legitimate versus fraudulent, and how the group planned to expand their operations into other city departments. Chen's home office contained multiple sets of accounting records, including authentic departmental books, alongside falsified versions used to conceal the fraud. Her personal files revealed the extent of her manipulation, showing how she had systematically altered inventory databases to match fraudulent purchase orders. The sophistication of her record-keeping demonstrated the conspiracy's organized nature rather than opportunistic theft. During initial interrogations, each conspirator attempted to minimize their involvement while implicating others as the scheme's masterminds. Tompkins claimed he had been pressured by superiors to approve questionable purchases and had not realized the full extent of the fraud. Chen insisted she had merely followed instructions from Tompkins without understanding their illegal nature. Delacroix maintained that his company had provided legitimate services and that any problems resulted from miscommunication with city personnel. These contradictory accounts quickly collapsed as investigators presented evidence of the conspirators' active participation and profit-sharing arrangements. Bank records showed substantial deposits to personal accounts that coincided with fraudulent city payments. Personal purchases by the conspirators, including expensive vehicles and real estate investments, demonstrated their financial benefit from the scheme. The trial began in September 1979, with extensive media coverage focusing on the betrayal of public trust and the impact on Houston's fire protection capabilities. Prosecutors argued that the conspirators had stolen money intended to protect citizens' lives and property, making their crimes particularly serious. The defense attempted to characterize the fraud as administrative errors rather than intentional theft, but evidence of deliberate deception was overwhelming. Expert testimony revealed that the missing equipment would have significantly enhanced the department's emergency response capabilities. Fire trucks that existed only on paper could have served high-risk areas of the city. Specialized rescue equipment that was never delivered would have improved the department's ability to respond to industrial accidents and natural disasters. The fraud had not only cost taxpayers millions, but had potentially compromised public safety. Tompkins received the harshest sentence of 12 years in federal prison, reflecting his role as the scheme's architect and his position of trust within the department. Chen was sentenced to 8 years, acknowledging her crucial role in concealing the fraud through records manipulation. Delacroix received 10 years for his participation and money laundering activities. Hensley, whose cooperation with investigators helped expose additional details of the conspiracy, received a reduced sentence of 6 years. Recovery efforts immediately following the conviction succeeded in locating approximately $2.1 million through asset seizures and bank account freezes. Properties purchased with stolen funds were sold, and legitimate assets belonging to the conspirators were liquidated to provide restitution to the city. However, investigators suspected that additional money remained hidden, possibly converted to cash or invested in assets that had not been identified. The missing $1.2 million became the focus of ongoing investigation efforts that continued throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Federal agents periodically revisited the case, interviewing the conspirators' associates and examining financial records for evidence of concealed assets. Despite these efforts, the trail remained cold, and investigators gradually shifted their attention to other priorities. The breakthrough came in 2015, when demolition crews clearing an abandoned storage facility in northeast Houston discovered a concealed compartment within an old fire department maintenance truck scheduled for scrap. Inside the hidden space, investigators found waterproof containers holding over $800,000 in cash, along with detailed records showing how Tompkins had systematically converted stolen funds to currency throughout the conspiracy's operation. The discovery revealed that Tompkins had anticipated potential exposure and prepared contingency plans for concealing assets beyond the reach of federal seizure. The truck, originally purchased legitimately by the fire department in 1976, had been modified to include hidden storage compartments that escaped detection during the initial investigation. Documents found with the cash indicated additional funds had been buried at locations throughout Harris County, though subsequent searches failed to locate these sites. The recovery brought the total restitution to nearly $3 million, finally providing closure to a case that had haunted investigators for decades. The Houston Fire Department used the recovered funds to purchase modern emergency equipment, ensuring that the stolen money ultimately served its intended purpose of protecting the community. The case established new procurement oversight procedures that became models for municipal departments nationwide, demonstrating how institutional vulnerabilities could be addressed through systematic reform. This extraordinary case of municipal fraud illustrates how trusted insiders can exploit bureaucratic systems for personal gain while compromising essential public services. The 36-year journey from theft to final resolution shows that patient investigation and unexpected discoveries can eventually bring justice, even when cases appear permanently closed.